can see it there. Hi everyone. I hope the sound is working. I see that on the chat that it seems to not be perfect. I will fix that as soon as possible, as soon as the presentation starts. So welcome everyone, and welcome for this presentation of the project created in Game Dev 2. This year we have 4 really interesting projects. I will let you discover them. But first, a few words. Game Dev 2 is a class about experiencing the entire process of game development. So from the pitch, then the game concept through some prototype. Today, the vertical slice after pre-production. The vertical slice is basically a really small part of the game, but representative of the final experience. And then we will enter in a phase of production with alpha, then beta, and the release at the end of the semester. Last year, for the students who were watching that, we were a bit more advanced in the process because the stream happened a few weeks later. And so what has been, the presentation was about the alpha. So that's normal to not have as much as last year. Just we are a bit earlier on the process. For those on the chat, in the chat, all your comments are really important. They work on the game, but they work for you. Like, we make game for player. So don't be afraid. Give comment and ask your question. They will be really helpful for the student. And so I think that's all I have to say. The presentation will start in a few seconds. So please sit back and enjoy this wonderful project created for you.
see the commissions from Dad yet? I was able to grab most of the materials we probably need.
Yeah, I'm just looking over it now.
Could I see them? You grabbed the one I told you about, right? The flaming sword one?
About that.
I begged you to let me try out Citri's commission. You've taken over the forge since you came back. Where is it?
Okay, well, 2 mundane commissions in a row isn't gonna hurt anyone. And the sword we wanted me to grab is gonna cost a lot to get the materials for it.
You thought I couldn't get it done.
Ferris, I crunched the numbers and it could set us back a lot of money if your enchantment doesn't work out.
But if I got it right, then you'd end up with even more gold. You just have to let me try. Only one of us is able to work in the forge at a time, else we'd get in each other's way.
Well, it's better to have a small amount of guaranteed profit than take a risk on a large quantity that's not guaranteed.
I went to university for this. I pioneered new insights into the field.
Well, okay, how about this then? This next commission will be a test run. We can have my forging skills and your enchantment thingamajigs, and if you do well...
When I do well...
Okay, then we can pick up all that profit we earn, and then you can pick up Citri's commission from Dad tomorrow. How about that?
Fine, but you better uphold your end.
Guide the Kinzo siblings from above using a keyboard and mouse and journey through the world of Bisport to craft, trade, and navigate the social arenas on a wire.
In regards to the narrative of our game, we wanted to implement something that would essentially illustrate the tensions between the two siblings, Ari, our expert forger, and Ferris, our very skilled enchanter, and as they fight for control over their family's blacksmith business. As the player, you make decisions that overall affect their relationship as well as their relationship with the town. Moving on to the next slide. We wanted to have a target audience of both teenagers and young adults as we are exploring the themes of both intergenerational trauma and child abuse. And now we'll be going over the demo preview.
So for what you're actually going to be doing in this game, I'm going to start by talking about forging. And in forging, this is really where you're going to be creating the item and kind of setting its base properties. And so you will start with the outline of what you're trying to make. It could be a hammer, it could be a sword, but you want to hammer it into the shape of that item. And that will be done through mouse clicks and kind of working the metal into that shape. And so once you have that item, you're going to want to enchant it. And enchanting is really where you're going to be able to refine and target specific stats that you want, or more specifically, what your customer wants. And so this is done by manipulating these nodes and putting in runes that will affect the various stats. And then through this process, and how you connect them together will really elevate the item to a bigger, to a larger degree. And finally, moving on to the overworld, this is where you will be able to talk to various townsfolk, see what they think of you, what they think of each other, and then you can also seek out some commissions. You can get your commissions from your dad, or you can seek out some really more lucrative ones from specific townsfolk. And now going on to the gameplay demo, we'll show you how the forging and enchanting works. And so for the gameplay, we're going to start in the overworld, and we're going to see that you can walk around, talk to various people, and look at items. And so we're going to start by going into the forging and creating an item. So we're going to head out to the top right, and then we're going to interact with the table to start the forging process. And as you can see, we have our outline of what we want to make, and in this case it's a hammer. So we're going to hammer out the top of it and really work that material outwards to try and get that shape. And so you can see as this process, we're going to continue extruding it effectively. And based on how well you can get this shape that you're going for will determine the stats, the overall stats. And so if we wrap up, you can finish whenever you want, whenever you feel like you're satisfied. And so after you create this item, we can go into the enchanting process. And this is, like I was talking about before, really where you can target specific items, or really specific stats for those items. And you can see that there are a bunch of sources at the top. You want to get those that energy at the top to flow down to that last node at the bottom. And to do this, you need to connect nodes and socket those nodes with runes. The runes are 4 elements, and they each buff one stat and decrease another one. And then you can see that once you have connected it through a pathway, you can see those stats change. And then once you have connected everything and gotten the runes socketed, you will be able to continue, and that's where you will really lock in your stats, and then you can see, what it is that you made. And then from there, you can turn in your item to commission if you want, or you can maybe forge a new item if you didn't like your results. And that is all for the demo.
Next up is characters. So this is the Kinzo family. Starting from the left, we have Oz, Crom, Ari, and Ferris. Ari and Ferris are the player characters. On the right side of the screen are the sprites for Ari, Ferris, and Oz, which will be seen walking around or controlled by the player on the overworld map. The next slide. Next are more NPCs. On the left are Auric and Keeps. Auric is a merchant who sells minerals, and Keeps is the innkeeper. And then on the right is Exit and Bit. They're both traveling merchants. For the art, we wanted to do 2 different styles. One which is for the narrative, so it'll be during the shopkeeping scenes or during dialogue, where you may see a bust of the character or a full body, depending on whether it's a shop or a just narrative style part of the dialogue. And then the sprites will be seen on the overworld, where you can interact with them.
This is a forging environment that we have that is where the player character will travel through. I made it darker in order to represent the use that the forge has seen throughout its years. Though I also used plain colors in order to represent the fact that it's not really as thriving as it once was. The blue table is there to emphasize the fact that it's a magic table, with the runes looking like dice, in order to represent the sort of magic aspect like in Dungeons and Dragons. Overall, it's a room that needs some tender love and care from the siblings.
Now, going on to some production plans and what we're going to be doing in the future. The main thing we want to focus on is increasing the amount of items that you can craft and then also enchant. That's going to be our main focus, in really getting those in there to give the player a variety of options for both what commissions they can do and just giving them variety in their gameplay. Another thing we want to do is do our narrative integration and really enhance that experience by adding more NPCs to talk to, more storylines to follow, and more relationships to look at. And then Lastly, just looking at bug fixing, really refining the code and making it more cohesive and structured better. And you can follow us on Twitter to get any updates on our production.
Last but not least, we'll have our narrative designers demonstrate for you one of the possible endings of the game if you're not careful and favor one sibling too much over the other.
You weren't even here for the past 3 years, but obviously that gave you the right to waltz right in and take full control over something we were supposed to work on together.
Ferris,
You relying on you was the big joke all along. You ruined everything.
Ferris!
It's a lot harder than that.
Ferris, I didn't mean to.
But you did. And despite all you did, all you do, they still want you in their life. They still want you to inherit everything. But just for a second, can't you realize that they do love you? I loved you.
Their good intentions does not excuse their abusive actions. I didn't want to make your life more difficult, though.
It's too late for that. Just because you feel bad doesn't mean I have to give you closure.
Damn it, they're running roughshod all over you. Like, are you even happy here?
I have a food, bed, even an education that's supposed to last me my lifetime. What do I have to complain about? What privilege do I have to complain? Frankly, you're using happiness as an excuse to be selfish.
I refuse to apologize for finding happiness.
That's fine! I think I preferred it when you weren't here to be such a constant disappointment.
Ferris!
Will you lead the Kinzo siblings to a happy ending, or will they remain trapped in their endless cycle of grief? There's only one way to find out, as you remain balanced precariously on a wire.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
It's the first one. Yeah.
So,
thank you very much for this presentation. Very audacious. So yeah, I wanted to ask. I have my notes here somewhere. Yeah. Wait a second. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing that you can address sensitive issue topic like yours. It's especially like that. It's really good. But I have several questions about the premise of your game, particularly with the aesthetic. I will explain. For example, your characters are really cute, which is a good thing. I like your style, but aren't you afraid of attracting an audience that doesn't expect this kind of topic, this kind of mature topic? And so the question will be kind of two questions. How do you position yourself in relation to this dichotomy between your project, the topic, and the visual, and also how you plan to introduce this topic in your game? I mean, when it's right at the beginning, or it's more and more? So could you tell us about that?
So in regards to the art direction, we kind of wanted it to be quite nostalgic for the target audience we were going for. It's meant to look happy and pretty, but at the same time, it has those very mature themes that would go over most kids' heads. Very much similar to the children's cartoons that our generation has basically been exposed to. In regards to integration of the narrative, we were just generally hoping to have probably around 5 cutscenes that overall were just going to be a narrative dump, as well as certain interactions with other characters / other NPCs would be able to further provide that kind of narrative integration.
more about the visual? Like, what was your thought when you planned to do this kind of?
We were thinking of having the sort of contrast between the idyllic aesthetic of very cutesy, very colorful, and the sort of like hidden ugliness reflective of how like in real life things look fine, they look normal, but beneath the surface things aren't really all that okay. So that was part of what made us choose to have this dichotomy and sort of almost clashing theme and art style.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think that I had some similar questions that you just asked, but they were just answered, so that's cool. You guys got some good stuff in since I met you last night, so it's looking really good actually. Really happy with where all the art is. As far as vertical slice, there's always more that you could do. A couple small polished things like consider in the future like particle effects and sound effects to go along with these tactile mini games. Really rope the player in. And the character walk animations, missing those a little bit. Those would, as well as footsteps, just those ambient things to really put the player in the space and with the characters. But yeah, in general, I just have really those like random tiny comments for you. So really good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say that this game is much amazing than last time I saw it, and I can see there's like a counting game over there, and the game gonna be very fantastic if you can make it. There's like two questions I have. One is like I saw like you put a lot of narrative on bad ending, and you even have like a drama for that. What about the happy ending? You didn't mention it.
We only have sort of an outline of the other endings right now, of which there would be the one we demonstrated was where Ari was prioritized over Ferris, and initially we figured we had some more ideas for that, so that's why we chose to show that here. The other endings would be if you focus on Ferris over Ari, if you balance the two, and we're considering a true ending, although that's still that's being worked on.
In regards to that, I phrased it as failure endings as well as narrative climax. I don't think that a happy ending would be good for this kind of game, because you can't just fix something that's been brewing over generations over like a week. So I feel like it would be rushed if, like, for instance, Ari and Ferris were just suddenly okay with each other at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean like you're not trying to like the player to win, or like it's optional?
I think at this point, both siblings do have that want to be actual siblings. It's just failures aside, right? At the end, they should be able to get along if they are able to have that kind of communication. It's like the TLDR, if there was healthy communication with each other, the narrative of this game would be like nothing.
Ultimately, the good ending is still coming from balancing the two's wants over the course of the game, but describing that ending as happy might be going a little bit too far, just because that would contrast a little bit too much with the themes that we're covering over the course of the game.
And the second question is, I saw the forging system and also like the enchanting system. But now they look like very integrated as themselves. Will they have any like connection in the game for the future version, or are they totally integrated?
Yeah, so it was not really shown there, and it's something that we're really working on refining, and like it's part of our making everything more cohesive. But in the alpha, we are going to have it so that when you forge an item, it will then go into your inventory, and then you will be enchanting that specific item. Just for the purposes of the demo, we just had them kind of separate to show them individually. But your normal gameplay loop will be either just in forging an item and then completing a commission, or forging an item and then enchanting it, including a commission, or maybe getting an item that you need to enchant. And,
Thanks so much.
yeah.
So I realized that you guys acted out your intro scene as well as your ending scene, and also you talked about having cutscenes in the game. I was wondering if you're planning on adding voice acting, which would complement both those things.
That is most likely going to be a summer thing. It's not something that, especially because we don't necessarily have a tried and true sound major, so I feel like it would put a bit more strain on Mark than it already has.
Yeah, I think that's very much something that would show up in the end of the alpha sprint or even the beta sprint, depending on where we're at. Voice acting is something that would be great to have from an atmosphere standpoint, but it's certainly not a priority in making the game cohesive and playable.
Hi. So, also related to sound, I saw that the overworld theme was also playing when you were doing enchanting and forging. I was just wondering what your general philosophy has been for the sound design, especially with music, and what you're planning to implement with that.
Right. We talked about the plan for different instruments appearing in different sections of the broader overworld in the last presentation, and that's still very much the plan. The interior sound hasn't quite been worked out yet because we're having some issues procuring good sounds that really fit a forging atmosphere, like the roar of the furnace and all of that. Recording all of that live has some technical challenges itself, but there may not be any music at all in those two sections because we really want the priority to be those environmental sounds and reactive sounds to player input.
Thank you. Hi. I happen to be a major fan of the voice acting. I think there was a lot of dramatization that was highly developed and rightly placed in this game, and I was a fan of the visual arts as well. I appreciate the fact that intergenerational trauma is one of the themes that this video game tries to address, because often in the 21st century, people have a misconception that video games are violent, video games really shouldn't be exposed to the kids, and it's not meant for girls. And so part of overcoming that is addressing, all roles of male and female in a game, and I think that was perfect. If you had an opportunity to expand upon the visual arts and expand upon the voice acting, how would your game in particular further develop this theme of intergenerational trauma?
That is a very good question.
Currently, originally we wanted, okay, let me rephrase this one more time. So the parents are probably going to play a bigger role in the game. Originally, the siblings were able to just find these commissions themselves, submit these commissions themselves, but we wanted to add the parents to have a bigger role, to have that kind of theme in there. So now there's going to be more interactions between the parents and the actual children, as they have an actual role in the game where you get your commissions from your dad and then you submit your submissions to your mom. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the main characters to be able to have those kinds of discussions with their parents.
Right. And on the audio side of things, I definitely think that if we had the time and the resources, having a fully voice-acted game would definitely lend itself to those narratives. I think that voice acting adds a lot of emotion and depth to that sort of narrative in games. While there are games that are managed to do that without voice acting, I think Celeste is an excellent example of conveying emotion through text. Despite that, I think that would be an excellent direction to take the game if we had those resources.
We have another question in the chat. If you could real quickly just all claim your roles on the team.
Sure.
So let's just go from
I'm narrative.
I am also a narrative designer. John?
I'm a gameplay programmer.
I'm the sound designer.
And I'm mainly programming and also slightly focusing on game design.
I'm character art with a little bit of environmental art.
Mostly environmental art with some UI.
I am primarily a game designer.
Programmer.
So yeah. Thank you. Yeah? Oh.
Sorry. I'd like to clarify on the gameplay, maybe I missed it. So when you were in the enchanting phase, it seemed kind of arbitrary how you're connecting them. Is there like any significance to the patterns that you're using to enchant the items?
Yeah. So this was a little bit hard to get across in the short time, but effectively how the enchanting system works is each rune that is present and has basically links and a connection from the source to that sink, will affect the stats. So if there are, say, 2 paths that go through the same rune, that rune will be counted twice. And then in addition to that, if you chain them together, like let's say you have 3 fire runes in a row, that will increase the basically effect that those runes have. So you both want to focus on doubling up on the runes that you have by making connections that reuse pathways, and by connecting them in a sequence of a similar type to really get the most out of the enchanting process.
Hi, you mentioned having ideas for multiple endings, but also having 5 different links within that cutscenes. To convey the narrative, are those cutscenes going to change the content depending on which side of the narrative of the endings you're leading to at a given time? Do you plan for that? Is that something you should be able to implement?
So essentially, I wouldn't think the endings would be too dissimilar to each other, because at the end, the siblings failed at being able to maintain the forge together. So there would definitely be some overlap, but obviously it would change based on which sibling you essentially allowed to take over the forge. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone, and prepare to steel yourselves.
So, in our game, you will be playing as Bastille, a man who sold his soul in order to become the greatest thief of all time. You will be making your way through hell in order to get your soul back from the devil after you sold it to him. Along the way, you will have to make your way through hell, defeat anybody in your way, and steal from them. But you won't only be meeting people that are enemies. You'll also be meeting people who just happen to live there. Other people who sold their souls in order to become the best at their respective skills. You will have to make your way... You will have consequences as you go from stealing, and you'll have to see how that goes. Leith, do you want to explain how it is to be Bastille?
Sure. Bastille is a great thief, and as such, he can steal practically anything.
be that weapons from enemies, items from the environment, or even projectiles right out of the air. Now, as such, with all that stealing, Bastille and the player will have to be able to quickly adapt to anything in their surroundings, any new tools that they acquire along their way, and they'll have to make split-second decisions about what they want to steal and how they want to do it. Brendan, you mentioned some consequences for stealing earlier, didn't you?
Yeah, so Bastille will have to be stealing things throughout the game. Like we said, stealing is the name of the game, but you will have consequences for these stealings. Bastille himself actually is very unhappy with himself and the way that he chooses to live his life. He sees himself as sort of a monster that's overtaken by the need to steal. As you go on, you will have to watch Bastille ride, come across as kind of humorous and ironic on the outside, but on the inside he will be having to be writhing with his own self-worth. Yeah.
With all that stealing, why doesn't he just, stop?
That's kind of interesting. So, Bastille has always had a very distinct urge to steal, but after he sold his soul to the devil, he actually was tricked. Along with the deal, he has to now only be able to use things that he steals. He'll never actually have any of his own possessions.
So, Bastille, he steals a lot, right? But he's not the only one affected by his actions. As the player progresses, they'll see that the impact that their thievery has on the world around them. For example, if a player is stealing from a certain area quite a lot, then that area will begin to fall by the wayside just a little bit. And if they go and try to take something from an area that they haven't been to in a while, the items there might be a little bit better, as that time might have had a bit of time to recover. But there is one area that does benefit greatly from all of Bastille's actions.
Yeah, you will be spending your time in a lot of different villages. One such village will be Mamtown, the town of greed. In this town is where you'll be starting your story, because this is where the devil sent you, since you were such a greedy man. As you go, you'll be stealing things from many different areas and bringing them back to Mamtown. In Mamtown, you will drop off any items that you don't deem useful at the time, and the people there will be taking those items and using them for their own purposes. As you go along, you'll be seeing the town start to change. It'll start to flourish, and the people in Mamtown will actually start to like Bastille. But you'll have to consider, is stealing for your own sake, and even for the sake of the people of Mamtown, is that worth all the sorrow that you'll be bringing along the way to the other villages?
Now, right now, Mamtown and Luce, the town of Pride, are the only areas that we have in the game. But as we progress, there will be more levels where the player can go to, and when they steal from those areas, the ones that they are currently in will have times to rebuild their economies a little for Bastille's return. We're planning on adding, speaking of the future, we're planning on adding in a lot of new levels. And as
new levels, what does that entail?
Oh yeah, new levels. New levels means new environments, new enemies to fight against, new weapons to steal, all kinds of things. There's armor, all sorts of stuff for the player to find. We're planning on having 4 levels in total by the end of the production, and we're going to have 10 unique weapons for the player to steal and be able to use in combat. There's going to be 5 armor sets for the player to use to defend themselves, and there's going to be dozens of characters which the player can talk and interact with. After this presentation, we'll begin work on our making the assets and new content for these sections of the game. And as we get closer to release, we'll begin working on polishing the game up to where it shines, and adding in all the new features and working on our marketing a bit more as we get closer to the release. Now, speaking of the release, we have the date for you. It is April 27th. April 27th, and it'll be releasing on both itch.io and on Steam. So, we've talked a lot about our plans for the future now. Why don't we show you a little bit of what the game's actually like?
Let's bring out Ken, who will be playing for us today a little bit. We'll be taking a look at Mamtown first, to kind of go around, talk to some of the NPCs, and let's see how they are.
So this is Mamtown.
Yeah, so there's one of our friendly little characters we'll be meeting.
Seems like a cool guy.
Oh.
Or maybe not.
Ah, well, Wally was a little bit angry with you. Why don't we go over and talk to Tuna?
I believe he's over there on the left. This guy kind of seems like a know-it-all. Let's actually go into some gameplay. I believe the entrance to Westwood is just over there. Now, people in this area are a lot more aggressive than people in Mamtown. They'll try to fight you right away.
Yep. Looks like he died. But don't worry, you can just restart.
Yep, that's the perks of already being dead. You can just come right back and try again.
Though you won't be able to keep the things that you had stolen in your past run. Oh, another mix-up.
Ah, so you can also encounter different areas whenever you enter the same level over and over again. This keeps the gameplay a little bit fresh, and there's different environments that you can encounter. There's some tough cookies in this town.
So, a little bit about those characters we got to meet. Tuna, like you said, is the world's greatest game developer. And you might have noticed he kind of realizes that his hell is actually a video game. So he has a vast knowledge of what it means to be in a video game, and let me tell you, he's not very happy about the irony of his hell. The other character was Wally, the world's greatest merchant. They are very sticky about their own stuff and what they have. So they won't be too happy when eventually you start stealing from their shop, because you can't buy anything. All the members of Mamtown currently aren't very happy with the state of things. They recently lost their boss. Every town has a boss, and recently, after their boss had stood up against the devil himself, the devil actually erased him. And now everybody's kind of just trying to figure out how to get along.
You actually can sneak up on enemies, and there's a little bit of a stealth gameplay elements. This isn't necessarily the best room to do it in, but in certain rooms you can kind of sneak up on enemies and get a lucky shot in on them while they're unsuspecting still.
All right, how about we cut the gameplay there and we talk a little bit about the sound and art direction.
Great idea. We'll bring in Chad, and Ken's going to stay right here.
Okay, for the art direction, we chose to go very lighthearted and comedic for our touch. This allowed our art team to put their own personal feel and make the characters and environment feel alive. This ties into very heavily with our 3D assets, and this will allow you as a player to very much connect with the environment and your character as you play through the game by encompassing the heavy dynamic and fast-paced action with 3D motion. Ken, I think you should talk about the music and sound direction.
Thank you, Charles. Start us off with the first sample. So you probably just heard that during the gameplay section. Our game is all about combat, fast-paced, you're stealing, you're dashing, you're attacking enemies, and we wanted our music to keep pace to match. We use a lot of fast rhythms and melodies combined with very action-packed instrumentation and dynamics to really hit home the themes of the gameplay and make you really connect and immerse with the world as you traverse it through Bastille. We have another example, actually. This one for our game's first boss. You know, a little secret. Actually, you know what? Screw secrets. Let's just straight up introduce Westwood, our game's first boss, right now.
That's right, we're going to get a little bit of boss gameplay demo for you right here. That's Westwood. She is the kind of leader of the town of Pride. You can see she's hanging out here with some of her lackeys. All right, we're in the boss room.
So a little bit about Westwood. She is, like we said, the world's greatest gunslinger, and also a loyal servant to the devil.
But how could someone who's so full of pride end up as a servant to the devil?
That's an interesting question. You see, when she first got to hell, she actually did something rather similar to Bastille. She challenged the devil as soon as she could in order to try and take control. However, she ended up losing that fight, and now, because she believes in strength over all else, has to do as he says.
You can see she's about to use one of her abilities that actually prevents the player from stealing the projectiles that she's using. A really annoying ability that kind of goes directly against what Bastille does.
All right.
Wow.
I think we'll cut the gameplay there. You got to see a little bit of the boss.
So we're really super excited to finally be sharing more information with you about the game. Now, we've still got a long ways to go in terms of development, as you've seen, and we got big plans for the future. So unfortunately, it will probably still be a while before any of you are actually able to play the game. But know that we'll be working hard, and that we do have a demo that's actually releasing later today. That's right. We're going to have a demo. It's going to be up on itch.io, and you'll be able to find the link on our Twitter.
So this is our Twitter. It is @LunarTuna You'll be able to scan that QR code and go directly to it. We'll be giving updates constantly about art, mechanics, things like that, and also the link to the demo.
Thank you, everyone.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have some. So very good presentation. The notes is stuff well.
Yeah, thank you. Very proud of it.
So as you can imagine, I see a lot of similarities in your game done with other existing other work. So what is your plan to really try to differentiate your game from other games from the same genre, but in the same time to keep the targeted audience, to keep people interested in your by this kind of game? What do you do?
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah. So we do have a lot of our game's genre is a roguelite. So we do have a number of elements in that game genre that we decided to keep like theirs. One big important part of that genre is the replayability of the games. So we try to increase levels, have different areas have different layouts that you can encounter and kind of see what all is there. As for differentiating ourselves, we're trying to really kind of emphasize the connectedness of the world. One thing is your actions have consequences in this game. So if you're stealing from one area, that area is going to have to start, it's losing its stuff. You're going to see diminished quality of items. And when you bring those items back to Mamtown, you actually see that place begin to thrive. And another important thing is in a lot of games similar to this genre, the player is able to kind of keep some of the stuff, certain things that they have left over in order to unlock permanent upgrades. But one interesting thing I found about this was the player keeps these even like after they die, which never really struck me as making that much sense because they lose everything else. So in this game, in order to actually progress, you have to survive and be able to get back to Mamtown in order to get certain upgrades for the player.
A question online from Black Mage, White Mage. How do you hope to further expand the game?
Right, yeah, so as I said a little bit in our presentation, I can elaborate a bit more. We've got more levels planned with different areas. We're hoping to give those areas their own unique feel, as well as have new enemies in them that a big part of what affects the gameplay is how the enemies try to attack the player, since the player is able to steal their items, steal their projectiles, all things of that nature. So having new content in that area will really help us kind of expand out like what elements of gameplay that there are. So yeah, we're also planning, more additional bosses. We're hoping to increase the amount of characters that the player can talk to, so you can kind of see these kind of rich story elements coming in and like see kind of the consequences of your actions from when you're talking to someone in a different town that you've stolen a lot from. They're not going to like you that much.
And you will see their town start to deteriorate while your town begins to flourish.
I have to say that it looks phenomenal. I think the visual style, the progress that has been made in the past couple weeks is really good. The color schemes look great, the levels look very consistent, and I think you're pulling off the like 3D rendered pixel enemies really well. I think that it just forces them to mesh with the environment, and so like almost makes it easier for you guys. It's really, really good. One question I had was, one of the like trademark qualities of roguelikes is just how like ridiculous it gets the longer you play. Just like difficulty is usually rampant while they're trying to you give them stuff to like counteract that. Could you talk a little bit about your plan for the difficulty scaling of the game?
Sure, yeah. So that's a good question. Yeah. So as far as difficulty goes, when we add those new areas, they're the player has to first complete and defeat the boss of the first area to unlock the next kind of zone of the game. And that's kind of where some of the difficulty is actually up to the player, because when they die, they'll respawn in Mamtown, but if you've already beaten that first area, you'll be able to still go to that second area right away if you so choose. Of course, when you die, you respawn with nothing, so it'll be a lot harder starting out in that area because you won't have, anything with you, and it's the second area, so enemies are, stronger, they have more health, do more damage, things of that nature. So kind of the difficulty curve is a little bit controlled by the player, but we do plan on just kind of increasing, like I said, the ridiculousness of players to where the player can know it's more their skill level that's helping them get through the game.
Man.
Yeah.
The other thing is that along with further levels and the enemies, the weapons that players will be able to access to further more their progress will have varied and different styles of attacking. Like, for example, currently in the game is a gun with an alternate ability that changes the way you play. By adding more and more features similar to that, players will be able to, reset back to a sort of ground zero for themselves and learn new different ways to play the game and give themselves a new challenge.
Yeah, I have to say the presentation is fantastic and everything is so cool. And the games just remind me like my childhood game, like from very old like gaming machine. But the thing is like there are also like a problem I think about virtual design is like the enemies or like the NPCs. The color of them is so similar to the environment. Is there any way to like improve that? Because now they look just totally like together.
One of the other guys want to take that?
Yeah, so that was my doing. It wouldn't be too difficult to retexture the enemies. All I would have to do is recolor them, and because of the way we switched how the enemies were animated midway through, it's actually a lot easier now to make those kinds of changes, whereas before we had to re-render all of their animations, but now it's more of a shaders type effect.
And also another question about the difficulty. I mean, even though like Philippine and Android mentioned that, I'm trying to ask like, even like when one developer cannot like really smoothly complete one level. So are you trying to set like different difficulty level for that, or you're gonna like decrease it?
Right now, as far as like adjustable difficulty levels, that's probably not something we're going to be able to get to with the time that we have. But we are planning on, when we're in the kind of next phase of our development in making all the new content and things like that, and especially in the polishing phase, that'll be a big part of getting playtesters and kind of rebalancing the game, making sure enemies don't move too fast, shoot too fast against the player, but still trying to hit that sweet spot of the player still has to be somewhat decent at the game. So yes.
Thank you.
Alright, so good job. It looked great. So one thing that really caught my attention was the idea that when you steal from an area, you pretty much benefit your main area. So beyond just the narrative implications of stealing from one area, like, is there more to stealing from one area? Does that impact the gameplay in any way?
So from a narrative sense, we don't have any plans for any warring villages. Currently, the devil is kind of the controller of all the other villages. He, like I said in the presentation, killed and got rid of the former boss of Greedtown. And you might have noticed that towns are kind of based off of the 7 deadly sins, but there are only 4 towns currently. The other 3 towns they're kind of in a state where they were in a state kind of where the Greedtown is right now. The Greedtown is close to kind of just falling apart and disappearing altogether. The other 2 towns are led by 2 bosses that are directly under the devil. And the devil in his town, which is New Belf, is the most prosperous town because everybody kind of just gives their stuff to them. So you'll have to kind of make your way through the first 2 villages, beat their bosses, go into their towns, meet the people there. They'll start to dislike you because you're stealing from them and their quality of life is starting to go down. But there isn't really much they can do about it. They kind of just gotta, they don't even like the devil that much because he's making their lives kind of worse. So they're kind of stuck in between, I can't really do anything against the devil and this guy's also making my life worse. So you'll kind of just see their unhappiness. And the people of Mamtown, your town, will actually start to like you and the place. So.
I just want to quickly say, I think the 3 models are really cool, and I think like that aesthetic is really awesome. I just had a quick question because I don't quite remember. In your first playable, did you have that same 3D model, or did you like render it onto a 2D texture and use it that way?
So for the first playable, we had some last-minute difficulties with the 3D modeling. So we went with a different method where we rendered out each frame individually, and then showed it to you as a single sprite on the screen. But since then, we've had the time to go in and fix everything that was wrong. So this is like the way it was supposed to look in the first playable.
So one question, 2 questions from the chat. One comment first, animation are so smooth, so that's very positive for you. So the question is about the movement in general. So I read it. It seems like the aiming is tied to the movement. Would you consider putting in a more twin-stick shooter style control scheme? How drastically would this affect the design? And someone else is asking, so the answer is no, but someone else is asking, is the aiming based on mouse tracking or the direction you are facing?
That was the original intent of the design, actually. For this presentation, we had to go with movement-based aiming, but that was not the intent. It's going to be added, and it was what the enemies were designed around, to reference that difficulty question from earlier. We are aware of the movement aspect of the game and how it's important for like the overall flow, and we are currently developing twin-stick aiming.
And as a bit of an add-on, Currently, the mouse is actually using that like point and click method. We just had like some last minute difficulties with the twin sticks, which is why we couldn't go with that.
There is also the keyboard option in the game, but the game is being designed for primarily controllers.
I have a question about well, I'm just curious about how the camera is currently sort of programmed, and like if that's locked, whether it's going to be sort of a fixed camera or if it's going to track the player in the final game, or what thought is going into that.
Yeah, so as far as camera movement goes, yeah, it's still a work in progress. That'll come down to us playtesting more and just generally trying to see what feels right as far as that goes. Like I said earlier, we were having a little bit of trouble with twin stick aiming, which will probably tie into how the camera works a little bit, because you might want to, if you're tilting the stick in the up direction to aim that way, you probably want to see further in that direction. So the camera does need a bit more work in general, which would be probably a big priority for us going into this next phase of development.
So basically the function of the camera, we got suggestions from Andrew and Professor Payne. There's a zoom for the player. So if the player in the zoom move in the zoom, the camera will not move. So if the player cross the edge of the room, the camera will follow the player and show more space to the direction of the player move.
Is your game supposed to feel tactical, like Hotline Miami, or just fast, like a stereotypical like bullet hell?
We're going for a mix of both. As more and more content is added to the game, there will be that tactical aspect of like planning what items you want to encounter and hunting for them. But at the moment and at the base of the game's design, it is that fast-paced bullet hell kind of action.
Okay, thank you so much.
Story. A long time ago, there once ruled the Grand Urza Imperium, whose influence spread across many star systems in their own little corner of the galaxy. They grew so large that they decided to create 4 major branches to help them govern the sector. Unfortunately, as time grew, these branches began to grow their own ideas of how the Imperium should be run. Tensions grew to their peak, and the Imperium collapsed, leading to each 4 of the branches to form their own major governments in their own corners of the sector. Bastion United, the military branch, left with the latest in military and technology. It left them as the most secure of the branches. Through their culture of fighting, they remained battle-hardened soldiers willing to tackle any challenge that they may face. The following of Reunion, the governing branch, the most orderly of the 4. They have a great loyal following, though there are those that secretly wish to undermine their efforts. They can detect the presence of others in the galaxy and use this for spies and infiltration. Then there is Ascended Systems Incorporated, a powerful megacorporation led by CEO Nell Carvin. They have gained power through doing contract work, and through profiteering, they maintain a powerful cycle of economic gain. Finally, there is Matryoshka Research Division, containing the most powerful minds of the once Imperium. They had created a powerful neural network to help them in their advances in science. And through this, they strive for a better future of the galaxy with the latest in technology and war. But finally, there is our character, Mason Carter, born on the asteroid Kula. He was barely able to survive, especially with the rise of the falling of Reunion. Luckily, he was able to take a job on the mercenary ship Delirium, for which they did a raid on an Ascendant shipyard, capturing several powerful battleships. Through this, the commander gave Carter a ship, a Lumen-class corvette, with the power to ram anything in it that stood in its way. Captain Carter was able to use this ship to complete bounties, forge relationships, and increase his crew. This is Astral Chart, an open-world adventure experience.
In this game, Astral Chart, you play, as we said, as Captain Carter. You are a struggling mercenary, just barely making ends meet. And your job is to captain the ship through combat and manage it. In this, you see our crewmate menu. The way this works is you have a set of crew. You have to choose this crew based on how they synergize well with each other, and then assign them to their correct roles at the right times. And here you can see we have different ship slots for each, so you can move them between places. Imagine you get into combat, and before you know it, your ship's damaged. What do you need to do? You need to get someone to repair that. So maybe you would want to move your captain to be a mechanic, or maybe move your captain to the weapons to destroy the enemy faster. After you're done with the mission and complete the bounty, you can move the crewmates to the living quarters. This is a good opportunity to let them talk to each other, which is a chance for you to learn more about who they are. How did living in this fractured empire change their experiences? And what happened to the empire? Also, it's an opportunity for them to learn new skills. I also want to talk about how the weapon systems work. Every faction has its own weapon, or own weapons. For example, Bastion United is a very rough and tough faction. Their weapons are kinetic, they do a lot of damage, and they're not really too complicated. The PDCs just shoot a bunch of bullets to shoot incoming missiles down. And Bastion United loves to use missiles of their own. Just launch them in, big explosions. On the other hand, a faction like Following of Reunion uses a lot of information as their main weapon, sending out drones far ahead and almost impossible to pick up to gather information before sending in long-range cruise missiles to take out enemies.
As the player, you have an opportunity to use these kinds of weapons on your own. As you complete missions for a faction, you you progress in the skill tree and unlock that faction's types of weapons. For Bastion United, you'd be unlocking their power. You'd be getting high damage weapons that are harder to aim because they're much more simple.
Bastion United, which is a very militaristic faction, and they have very advanced weapons like the point defense cannons, or the PDC, and missile launchers. So let's first pursue one of their missions here. And you can see that we